Hey everybody, welcome to the fourth video for the DoD primer for Hacking for Defense here at the University of Florida. Today we're going to be going over DoD acquisitions and that acquisition process. There'll probably be a lot of questions after this video. Please feel free to bring them into class or ask them in the Canvas page. We'll do what we can here. Overall, this is a big level overview, and I urge you to stay focused on each of your projects as you're working through this and understand how your project kind of fits and where it exists in the DoD acquisitions process. So DoD acquisitions overview, it's famously complex. We alluded to in the last video how it causes quite a few of the barriers that we'll see in the DoD. The requirements process drives all of our purchases, which is a process that feeds into the DoD acquisitions process. If you have a moment, you're on your computer or your phone, just do me a favor, look up DoD acquisitions process map. Hacking for Defense has done a phenomenal job of distilling this into these 4 steps here, but I do, so you understand the complexity, I want you guys to take one look at an eyesore of a process map. All right, now that you've looked at that, really that whole thing can be broken down and simplified into requirements get developed, prototypes get developed, production occurs, and then the item is sustained throughout its life cycle. So in DoD parlance, in my terms, if you guys are working on a problem, it's a capability gap. It's something that we don't necessarily have. So they emerge because our planning cycle is on a 5-year, our planning cycle follows a 5-year method, the PPBE cycle. And so essentially we're trying to predict the future. What are we going to need 5 years from now? And so as an example, in 2017, we were in Afghanistan still. In 2022, we are not. In 2017, there wasn't a conflict going on in Ukraine as actively as it is now in 2022. So we're trying to figure out what's going to happen in 5 years and what capabilities we need to address what's going to happen in 5 years. And unfortunately, we're not always the best about predicting the future. We didn't always predict what was going to happen in Ukraine, and we didn't predict what was going to happen in Afghanistan. So as you can see, combatant command missions and deployments and challenges evolve far faster than the military's 5-year planning cycle. Another big point to hit on is if the DoD funds it, they typically own the intellectual property. There's a whole bunch of laws surrounding DoD acquisitions called the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations. It is hundreds of pages. If you were to print it out, the stack of books is pretty high, and there's folks whose entire job it is to be experts on that. But essentially that distills down, one of the elements of it distills down to when the DoD funds the development of it, not just the production of it, then the DoD owns that intellectual property. And then a key piece on the capability gap. So a capability gap could lead to multiple requirements, and we'll see that in the example here at the end. So the DoD has different buckets of money. They call it, or colors of money is what we call it. So we have operational money that's used for day-to-day expenses. That's how we buy paper clips. It's how we buy paper, anything that I'm using in my day-to-day job is being spent by operational money, travel, things like that. Then we have procurement money that's used over the course of multiple years to buy our big expensive items, the things that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, tanks, planes, etc. RDT&E money, so that's research and development money used to develop products over time. So maybe they're not quite ready to enter into production where the procurement money is going to pay for them to be produced and fielded to the different services, but they need to be research, developed, tested, evaluated, and brought up to that level where they're ready to be produced and put out to the users. And then you have OTAs, other transactional authorities. So this is something that has existed for many years, but has gotten news recently. If you look up DoD, other transaction authorities, there's some program offices doing some great things with this. It reduces barriers to entry. It allows startups or other commercial entities that aren't the major defense contractors to get into the game with the DoD, and it lets us get prototypes quite a bit faster than a lot of the other procurement methods would. There's also some special cases here, some special authorities to consider. So there's purple money. That's how SOCOM is funded, and some other organizations like JIDA on the slide. It comes with a lot of oversight, but it comes with a lot of additional authority as well. Purple money is basically joint money. Rapid Acquisition Authority, the SecDef, can reprogram money up to $200 million a year to address a capability gap that is identified and needs to be rapidly acquired. And then we have overseas contingency operations, so OCO dollars. That is primarily that's what funded Iraq and Afghanistan, the Ebola response, and other overseas contingency operations, things that couldn't be predicted for and budgeted for. That money pays for the things that are over there, right? So plane movement, moving back and forth, feeding and equipping with the consumable type stuff our guys and gals downrange. And then continuing resolutions. So continuing resolutions should get like a couple asterisks and exclamation points there. Continuing resolutions can be a real showstopper for the procurement process and the acquisitions process. So under a continuing resolution, which happens anytime a budget doesn't get passed on time by the government, Congress, and then the president, et cetera, we can't spend more than 65% of the previous budget, and we also can't have any new start contracts signed. So if something was supposed to start at the beginning of the DoD fiscal year, which is 1 October, and we're going to sign a contract and it's going to be great and it's going to be fully funded based off the budget that was submitted, but that budget doesn't get approved, there's no money to start that new contract. So that contract can't start until the full budget is approved, signed, and we move out of a continuing resolution. So the acquisition method depends on quite a few things that we're going to dive into a little bit more here, but the stakeholders, the cost, the novelty of the technology, the urgency of the requirement, and timing, the organizational culture, and who they're talking with in their position in the chain of command. So think about that, who you're talking with in the position of the chain of command when you're talking to your project sponsors, when you're talking to your to your users out there, and realize that, you know, if your project sponsors an individual battalion looking to solve a single problem, they may need a range of options that allows them to address the problem, or maybe they need other organizations inside the DoD to jump on board with it and become stakeholders to really get that solution out there. So stakeholders, technology, who's providing that tool or service, right? Is it in-house within where your project sponsor is, or is it external? The DoD sponsor, so a lot of these capabilities will fall into a DoD program of record. It might not already be a program, but typically there'll be a program manager that might be interested in championing that and bringing it on board, and hopefully that comes with money. Funding, what contract vehicle is the program going to use to pay for the technology, and we'll get into that on the next slide. The contract, how is that money going to be spent? And there's a whole field in the military with contracting officers that do that in the DoD acquisitions process. And then the user, who's actually going to use this technology. So talking about the different acquisitions methods. So, realize based off the type of money a command has available or a project sponsor has available and the purchase vehicles they have available, they may or may not have the authority to fund different elements of your project. But most project sponsors will work to get something done. I know some of you guys are going to be able to do some great things here coming up. But just to list here, you have simplified acquisitions process, which if we were to get into it, really isn't that simple. The government credit card process, and then the full acquisitions process. So some of these thresholds have changed in the last couple of years. Government credit cards can now go up to $5,000, or sorry, $10,000, depending on a couple key things. But basically, if you're using the government credit card, it's a commercial capability that's out there. Then you swipe it, and the civilians are able to use it, and it's not something that's unique to the DoD. Simplified acquisitions process under 25K. Competitive quotes from 3 different vendors. So now we're starting to get into a little bit more process required to invest in something. And then anything over that, we're looking at a full acquisition process that's going to involve contracting, a competitive solicitation phase, developments of prototypes, etc. The TRL thing that you see there on the right, that's technology readiness level. So when you see TRL 3+, again, that's something that exists and is out there to be utilized by some market of some customer. When you look at the lower level technology readiness levels, you're talking about what DARPA is doing. It's TRL One is going to be looking at like the internet in the early 90s, late 80s, as when it didn't exist yet out in the commercial world. Something as simple as Wi-Fi now would be tier a higher technology readiness level. Excuse me. So novelty. So when you S&T is science and technology. So at S&T prototypes, that is very early. That's pre research and development, science and technology. You're getting white papers, you're getting information, you're making prototypes, seeing how things work. And then on the other side, you have programs of record where the requirements are getting built up. There's a whole staff at a program office to oversee that specific capability. Then you look at urgency of requirements. So a joint urgent operational needs statement is the highest priority. So looking at what was happening in Iraq with ISIS and the drones, that is an example of something that was highly urgent, and need statements were getting submitted up for capabilities to address that. If you look at the early 2000s when IEDs became a common weapon that was used against us, and we were moving in the military, the DoD was moving around in flat-bottomed Humvees. That's what led to the MRAP, right? Mine-resistant armor protected vehicles with the V-shaped hull that was able to protect the troops inside a little bit better. And so the Joint Urgent Operational Needs Statement process is a very high level process, but it's where requirements can get taken from the lowest level, and pushed up in a rapid manner. That leads us to the question in the middle of this slide: is what does rapid mean? Does 16 months mean rapid? That's up to each different organization's culture that they have around acquisitions. So with DoD funding, we've talked about it a little bit. Timing is key. So this fiscal year starts on 1 October. Ideally, a budget's approved then, and the DoD doesn't move into a continuing resolution. But it's actually a little bit counterintuitive. So early in the fiscal year, when funding is just coming online, typically it's hard to get money for new projects, especially if you're in a continuing resolution. Late in the fiscal year, the DoD is a use it or lose it type environment. So, it's currently, as I'm recording this video, August. There's a big push from a lot of our fiscal folks to spend money on anything that might be a new initiative. What are those things that we had put on the back burner because of we didn't have the resources to fund it? Now those come out and get spent, whether that's regardless of the bucket of money. It's called expiring funds. So when that money is due to shut off on the end of September, that's where that money comes from. So who are we talking to in their position within the chain of command? So when you're talking to your users, when you're talking to your project sponsors, you need to understand who the folks are that are sponsoring any given project. Are they a program manager? Are they a senior leader? Are they a contract manager? You want to be able to engage with different folks that have the different authorities to do different things, right? The program manager has spending authorities related to buy things related to their problem. Senior leaders have a huge influence on both program managers and on the requirements that fall within their programs, because program managers don't come up with their own requirements. They're given those requirements from operating forces. And then contract managers, they are the folks that spend the money the program managers have. So, a program manager may want to buy something, but may not be able to unless they use particular contract vehicles. So again, a simplified version of the DoD contracting process. There's contracting action, demonstration, test and evaluation, and deployment. Again, to understand the complexities happening at the subsurface level here, please just look at a Google picture of the DoD acquisition process map. And you'll see that again, this acquisition process is complex and does create some barriers. All right, so this is an example from the Navy. It's an operational requirements flow down from PACOM. So PACOM says to win a war, we need to have awareness of the potential adversary's disposition of forces within the area that we intend to operate in, and be able to maintain through all phases of conflict. So this is called joint intelligence preparation of the environment. So if you remember back to the intelligence cycle, during the planning and collection side of things, the commander of Pacific Command that is has responsibility. If you remember back to the first video, for the entire Pacific Ocean, they need to be aware of what the enemy is intending to do. So that draft goes down to PAC fleet. right? So that's Pacific Fleet. So that's the Navy command in charge of all of the Navy assets operating in the Pacific. Specifically, you have Third and Seventh Fleet. So they decide I can use the Third and Seventh Fleet to conduct joint intelligence preparation of the environment. They can collect things, they can disseminate products, etc. Seventh Fleet's going to direct its ships, aircraft, submarines, Marines, etc., to use and sensor assets to conduct the joint intelligence preparation of the environment. The N2 shop in the Seventh Fleet, so the N2 in particular, staff positions are labeled by numbers. You know, N1 does administration, N2 is intelligence in this case, N3 is operations, etc. In the Marine Corps, we would call them G shops, but the numbers remain the same. So G2 is intelligence. In this case, Seventh Fleet, N2, the intelligence section on staff for Seventh Fleet. They task, collect, process, exploit, and disseminate and maintain intelligence preparation of the environment for the commander of Seventh Fleet. That's that acronym there. Again, the DoD, you're going to encounter a ton of acronyms, ask questions when you're engaging with your project sponsors and the users that you interview. So the Seventh Fleet N2, Lieutenant Knudsen, he identifies potential operational gaps and determines possible ways to fill those gaps. So the operational requirements have flown down. And now if we weren't able to do this, the acquisition requirements or whatever gaps there are in doing this, the acquisition requirement now flows up. So from Seventh Fleet, do I have all the tools needed to accomplish my operational requirement, joint intelligence preparation of the environment? If the answer is yes, great, we're done. And you'll see as this flows up, if the answer is yes, that we're done. If a organization as it moves up has the ability to do this, they can push that capability down, and we no longer have to continue through with the acquisition process. However, if the answer is no, the acquisition requirement gets sent to PAC Fleet. So Seventh Fleet is one of the two Navy fleets out in the Pacific. They are going to send that up to their higher headquarters, Pacific Fleet. Does PAC Fleet have the money and resources to fund it? If they do, great. They validate it, they resource it, and we're done. If they don't, PAC Fleet's going to endorse the requirement and send it to U.S. Fleet Forces Command. U.S. Fleet Forces Command is over all Navy operating forces inside the service. So if they have the money again, now they're going to validate and resource it. And if they don't, they send it to Big Navy, OPNAV. OPNAV is going to look and see if there's an existing program of record inside, some of these acquisition organizations or system commands. So as an example, is there a program of record over at NIWC, Naval Information Warfare Center, PAC or LANT? And if there is, great, we're done. That program of record is going to do what they need to do and with the acquisition. If not, there needs to be a new program of record in the Navy's budget that gets sent to the Secretary of the Navy, to the Secretary of Defense. Through this whole budgeting process, 5 years out, budget gets approved by Congress, maybe. If not, continuing resolution, and that new start program of record can't happen yet. But let's say the budget gets approved. Great. But now money flows down from SecDef to SecNav over to the Navy, and the Navy is able to create their program management office and decides who to look to for production and development contracts and things are happening. Now, when you say a prime contractor, you're talking about Boeing, Lockheed, et cetera, the big ones that you've mostly heard of, Raytheon. But a government contractor or a naval acquisitions command is basically going to build this thing, right? So whoever that's going to be is going to involve a bunch of contracting, a bunch of production processes that we're not going to dive into. But when this thing's going to get built, it's going to get made available to U.S. Fleet Forces Command to issue to these Navy units. Then it's going to get, they're going to figure out how to man, train, and equip it for it. And then they're going to get it to PAC Fleet so that PAC Fleet can get something done many years later. Here's some additional resources on DoD acquisition. So Defense Acquisition University, they have all kinds of guidebooks out there. You see some DoD instructions. The DAU has a lot of simplified products. If you're needing to understand something, there's a bunch of definitions. Feel free to ask me questions if I'm available, and we can get into it. But hopefully this kind of outlined some of the challenges and some of the ways that the defense acquisitions system works and doesn't work. And I wish you guys luck with the rest of the course.